The South African government has asked the International Monetary Fund for $4.2 billion. The money would come from a facility that provides financing to countries facing an urgent balance of payments need, without the need to have a fully fledged program in place. Well, there has been much criticism. Some say the country will be forced to surrender its sovereignty. Others see it as a first step back from the abyss. Danny Bradlow is with us now, Professor of International Development Law and African Economic Relations at the University of Pretoria, and he has been watching this development closely. Professor, good afternoon to you. So which side of the fence do you sit on here? Is it a humiliating defeat, or could this be the salvation of the South African economy?
I don't think it's either. I think it's a source of funding. So we need the money. South Africa needs to fill the gap of its financing. It needs foreign exchange. The IMF is offering it on good terms and in a flexible way, and so it's worth looking at skeptically and making an informed judgment as to whether it's the best available source. And I think it is potentially the best available source. The one thing that does concern me is that so far, for sub-Saharan Africa, the IMF has given about $10 billion through this rapid financing facility that South Africa would get the money through. And it seems strange to me that they would be giving $4 billion just to one country in sub-Saharan Africa. But I am a bit concerned that maybe the money will come with more conditions than that the rapid facility implies.
What type of conditions, Professor, would we be talking about?
That's hard to know without knowing exactly what's being negotiated, but the key point is that the conditions are negotiated. It's not that the IMF has a preset package of conditions that South Africa would have to accept. And that would be, if they did that, and that was more or less what they did in the 1980s, in the bad old days of structural adjustment. But they don't really operate that way anymore. So there's much more space for negotiation. The IMF is much more concerned with issues like environment, social sustainability, inclusiveness. And so the conditions will depend on what's been negotiated, what the government asked for, and what the agreement is. But I would expect a more complex, if there is a set of conditions, that they're more complex and more geared towards a sustainable adjustment process that's more inclusive.
You also make the point that it is incumbent upon any country to negotiate properly. In other words, we've got to be adept. We've got to be fleet-footed when it comes to this kind of thing.
Exactly. It's a negotiation, and it's just like any other bank or financial institution. What you get depends on how well you negotiate. I think between the Treasury and the Reserve Bank, we have very competent negotiators. The question is, what will they ask for, and where will they use their negotiating power? Obviously, because it's a negotiation, there's going to be give and take. Because we have to ask for money, we're obviously somewhat in a weaker position, but we do have negotiating power, and it's a question of how we use it. And that's what we'll see when the letter of intent is eventually revealed after the IMF vote next week.
Just a quick answer, if you please. Time is always against us. The IMF itself, you also make the point about what type of negotiating partner it is. Is it reasonable or unreasonable when it comes to that?
I think it depends, is the quick answer. It has been unreasonable in some cases, but I think it's open to being much more reasonable. And so I think for a country like ours, there is space for them being reasonable and negotiating fairly.
I thank you for joining us today. We await that mix of conditions. Danny Bradlow, Professor of International Development Law and African Economic Relations at the University of Pretoria.